the footprint evidence, the casts that were recovered from this site, I would be very convinced of the credibility of the film. The Sasquatch has retained the more primitive characteristic of a very flexible instep, a mid-foot flexibility, which can be seen here.
On October 20th, 1967, two men rode their horses into a remote stretch of Bluff Creek in Northern California, carrying a rented camera and a belief that they were about to find a monster. What they filmed in the next 59 seconds became the most analyzed, most argued over piece of footage in the history of cryptozoology. A tall, hair-covered figure walking along a dry creek bed. It turns. It looks directly into the lens. Then it vanishes into the trees. For more than half a century, that footage has survived every attempt to prove it's fake. And in 2024, the most advanced artificial intelligence ever built was pointed straight at it. The results were not what anyone expected, because what the AI found, or rather what it failed to find, is more disturbing than a simple yes or no ever could have been. If you are the kind of person who needs the real answer, not the comfortable one, stay with me through this entire breakdown. By the end, you may wish the AI had just called it a fake. Consider subscribing, because the deeper this goes, the stranger it gets. Let me walk you through what the analysis actually revealed, because the truth here is far more complicated and far more troubling than any headline suggests. The Patterson-Gimlin film occupies a strange place in the world of unexplained evidence. There are thousands of alleged Bigfoot videos floating around. Shaky phone clips, dark shapes in tree lines, blurry figures that fall apart the second you look closely. Almost all of them get debunked within days. Obvious costumes, misidentified bears, outright digital fakes. This one footage is different. It is the only piece of cryptid evidence that has stayed under serious scientific consideration for 57 years. Not believed by everyone, not dismissed by everyone, just stubbornly, maddeningly unresolved. To understand why, you have to know the men behind the camera. Roger Patterson was a rodeo rider and a small-time author who had become obsessed with Bigfoot after reading reports of sightings across Northern California. He had self-published a book on the subject and was shooting a low-budget documentary about the phenomenon when he set out that October. Bob Gimlin was something else entirely. An experienced music, outdoorsman, and horse wrangler, level-headed, not a believer in much of anything. He came along partly to keep Patterson safe in rough country and partly because the mystery interested him. That detail matters. The skeptic was in the saddle right next to the dreamer. They rode into an area where there had been recent sightings and reports of strange footprints in the mud. According to their account, they rounded a bend near a fallen tree and saw it. A large, hair-covered figure crouched low by the water. Patterson's horse panicked and reared. He threw himself off, ripped the camera out of his saddlebag, and ran toward the creature while the film rolled. What the footage shows is a bulky, hair-covered figure striding away from the camera. Shoulders rolled back, arms swinging loose. A walk that is fluid and heavy at music at the same time. Measurements taken at the site later put the figure at roughly 7 feet 4 inches tall. And then, about 28 music seconds in, comes the moment that turned this into a legend. The creature turns its whole body and looks straight back at the lens. That single image, known to researchers as frame 352, is the most famous photograph in the entire field. A breath later, the figure walks into the tree line and is gone. Patterson and Gimlin say they tried to track it, but it moved into terrain no horse could follow. When they returned to the creek, they found a trail of footprints. Deep, large impressions showing toes, a heel, and a strange flexing through the middle of the foot. They poured plaster casts of several of them. Those casts still exist. Hold that thought, because they come back to haunt this story later. That is the basic account. Now, this is where it stops being simple. For decades, every attempt to prove the film a hoax has failed, and every attempt to prove it real has failed just as completely. The footage lives in a permanent state of not proven either way, which is almost unheard of for this kind of evidence. Most mysteries eventually crack. This one never has. The skeptical explanation has always been clean and obvious. It is a man in a suit. Patterson was making a Bigfoot documentary. He needed a creature on film, so he or someone working with him put on a costume and walked through the creek while the camera ran. No unknown species required. No biological impossibilities. Just a guy in a suit and a lie that got out of hand. It is the simplest answer, and for a long time, it was the most reasonable one to believe. But then researchers ran the footage through software that was never designed to settle arguments about monsters. The 2024 study used motion tracking algorithms originally built to catch CGI and deepfakes in modern video. These tools do something the human eye cannot. They track how flesh, muscle, and fat shift underneath skin and fur, hunting for the tiny inconsistencies that betray artificial movement. Here's what happens when a person puts on a fur suit and why it is so hard to hide. The fabric bunches and wrinkles at the joints, the elbows, the knees, the shoulders, the hips. The proportions go wrong because you are stretching a costume over a human skeleton. So, the The arms and legs tend to read as too long and too thin against the torso. The fur itself moves the wrong way, clumping and sliding as the body underneath shifts. And the center of gravity stays stubbornly human, which produces a walk that other humans instantly recognize, even if they cannot say why. Modern costume designers know every one of these tells. They fight them with animatronics, muscle suits, careful tailoring, and digital touch-ups in post. And even with all of that, building a convincing non-human creature that walks on two legs is so difficult that big-budget Hollywood films still get it wrong all the time. So, researchers fed the algorithm the original 59 seconds, expecting it to light up with costume signatures. It found none of them. The figure's movement showed flesh and muscle shifting under the fur in ways consistent with a living thing. The proportions read as non-human. The arms were longer than a person's. The torso was broader. The legs sat shorter against the trunk than any human frame. The fur did not bunch at the joints the way fabric does, and the walk simply did not match human mechanics. The analysis flagged specific anomalies that are worth slowing down on. When a human being walks, the hips rise and fall and trace a small figure eight, and the center of gravity shifts in a predictable rhythm. The figure in the film keeps its hips far more level. Its stride runs long relative to its leg length, and the way weight settles into each step points to a body mass far heavier than the apparent height would suggest for any human. Then there is the arm swing. When we walk, our arms swing in opposition to our legs, music, without us thinking about it. Right arm forward as the left leg steps forward. It is automatic, wire deep, and brutally hard to suppress or fake for any length of time. The figure in the film swings differently. The motion comes more from the shoulder with far less bend at the elbow than a person naturally shows. And then the detail that genuinely unsettled the people running the study. The algorithm picked up evidence of muscle groups moving under the fur that do not correspond to human anatomy. Large masses across the upper back and shoulders that flex and shift during the walk in ways a person in padding simply could not produce. These were not the big, obvious bulges you could fake with foam. They were subtle changes in the contour of the body, the kind you only get when real muscle tissue music is contracting and releasing underneath. This is the moment the findings turned from interesting to disturbing. The software built to expose fake human movement looked at the footage and found no human being in a costume, but it also could not tell anyone what it was looking at. The biomechanics matched no known species in its training data. Put plainly, the AI was saying two things at once. This appears to be a real biological body with real muscle and tissue moving in a coherent, consistent way. And I cannot identify what kind of body this is because nothing I have ever been trained on moves like this. Now, let me take the hoax claims head on because this is where the story gets even stranger. In 2002, a man named Greg Long published a book claiming he had finally solved it. The story went like this. A man named Bob Hieronymus had worn a costume built by a designer named Philip Morris, and Patterson had paid him $1,000 to walk through the creek bed on camera. It sounded like the smoking gun that would close the file for good, but it came apart almost immediately. Hieronymus described a suit made of horsehide and synthetic fur that reeked. Morris described selling Patterson a suit of synthetic nylon and Dynel fur for $435. Those are two contradictory descriptions of what is supposed to be the same costume. Neither man could produce the actual suit, a single photograph of it, a receipt, or any physical proof that it ever existed. And Hieronymus' account of how the filming happened clashed with known facts about the site and the footage itself. So Morris tried to rebuild the costume from memory, and the recreation looked nothing like the figure in the film. The proportions were off. The fur read as plainly artificial. When someone put it on and tried to walk like the creature, it looked exactly like what it was, a person in a costume. Then researchers did something clever. They ran Morris's recreation through the very same motion analysis algorithms. The software flagged it as artificial instantly. The suit bunched at the joints. The proportions screamed human in padding. The movement obeyed human biomechanics down to the last step. Every single tell that the AI failed to find in the original Patterson-Gimlin footage was glaringly obvious in the recreation. Sit with the paradox, music that creates. If the original is a hoax, then it is a hoax so sophisticated that the very man who claimed to have built the costume cannot rebuild it, even now with modern materials and decades of advancement. The AI catches the modern fake in a heartbeat. It finds nothing to catch in the 1967 film, and this is not a one-off. Over the years, Hollywood costume designers, special effects veterans, and dedicated researchers have all tried to recreate what that footage shows. Every attempt has been instantly separable from the original under frame-by-frame analysis. The recreations always look like people in suits. The original simply does not. Now, back to those footprint casts because they bore a second mystery on top of the first. The casts show a feature that is genuinely hard to fake, a flexible midfoot. The region between the heel and the ball of the foot shows compression and movement, suggesting it bends more like the foot of a gorilla or a chimp than the rigid foot of a human. This matters more than it sounds. When you walk, your foot is essentially a stiff lever. The arch is fixed. The middle does not flex. Great apes are built differently. They have mobile pyramid feet that bend during a step, letting the foot grip and push in ways our feet never could. The cast from Bluff Creek show exactly that ape-like flexibility. Faking that in 1967 would have demanded something close to impossible. You would need a detailed understanding of primate foot mechanics, a device that could press the right compression patterns into the ground in the right places, and the ability to work that device across rough creek terrain without leaving a trace of the rig. And in 1967, that depth of knowledge about how a primate foot actually flexes barely existed outside of specialist research labs. A rodeo rider shooting a budget documentary was not carrying that science in his back pocket. When the AI applied three-dimensional modeling to reconstruct the force needed to create those compression patterns, it pointed to a body weight somewhere between 540 and 760 pounds. Far heavier than a human could be while still matching the height and proportions on the film. And once again, the force distribution did not match a human gait. Something with very different mechanics made those prints. Then there is frame 352 itself, the instant the creature turns and looks back. Researchers hit it with everything: facial recognition, muscle movement detection, eye tracking analysis. The head turn reads as a natural fluid motion. The neck, shoulders, and upper torso all moving together the way a living thing moves when something catches its attention. The timing matches a real organism reacting to a stimulus, not a performer hitting a mark. The face, as much as the resolution allows, does not show the stiff mask-like quality you would expect from a costume head. And the most unsettling detail of all, the eyes appear to track the camera. This is faint, and earlier analysts missed it entirely. But high-resolution scans, music of frame 352, and the frames around it suggest the creature's eyes are focusing on the camera and following music it as it moves. That kind of realistic eye movement is almost impossible to fake with 1967 technology, and it is still hard to pull off convincingly today, even with modern animatronics. So what does all of this actually mean? The honest answer is that the AI confirmed what a handful of biomechanics experts had quietly argued for years. The footage shows no obvious signs of being a hoax, but it has not proven a real unknown species either. What it has done is make the mystery worse by narrowing the explanations down to three, and every one of them is a problem. Possibility 1. It is a hoax so advanced that it blew past the costume and effects capabilities of 1967 by a wide margin. A hoax that has never been successfully replicated even with modern technology. A hoax that left behind footprints with biomechanical features that science did not fully understand until years later. And a hoax pulled off by a man with no obvious money to fund that kind of operation. Possible, but you have to believe a rodeo rider out-engineered Hollywood for 57 years and counting. Possibility 2. The film shows a real, undiscovered species of large primate living in North America. This is what believers have always claimed, but it carries its own crushing weight. Despite thousands of reported sightings, there are no bodies, no bones, no DNA that proves such an animal exists. In an age of trail cameras blanketing the forests and environmental DNA sampling, pulling traces of life out of soil and water, a breeding population of giant primates should have turned up by now. The fossil record shows no large apes ever living in North America. The AI does not fix any of that. It only confirms that if it is real, it moves like a large bipedal primate of some unknown kind. Possibility 3 is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable, and it is the one the researchers kept circling back to. What if we are asking the wrong questions entirely? What if the film shows something real, something that interacts with the physical world and leaves physical traces, but does not slot neatly into our categories of animal or costume? It is a question that makes serious scientists want to leave the room. But the AI's own conclusion is what dragged that question back to the table. The software essentially said, "This moves like a real physical entity, and I do not know what it is." That is not a satisfying answer, but it may be an honest one. So, after all the processing power, all the algorithms, all the forensic firepower, the Patterson-Gimlin film is exactly what it was before, the best evidence that proves nothing. Except now we know something new and far more uncomfortable. Even our most sophisticated detection tools cannot resolve it. The footage shows something that reads as physically real by every measure we can apply, while refusing to tell us what that something is. And that is the part that should keep you up tonight. The disturbing finding was never that AI proved Bigfoot real or proved it fake. The disturbing finding is that AI confirmed the footage is genuinely anomalous. It is not obviously a hoax, and modern hoaxes are caught with ease. It is not obviously a known animal, because the biomechanics refuse to line up. And it is not CGI or digital trickery, because it predates those tools and carries none of their fingerprints. It is an artifact that does not fit our boxes. And 57 years on, even artificial intelligence cannot force it into one. The people closest to it have never wavered. Bob Gimlin is still alive, 92 years old, asked about that day thousands of times across the decades. His story has never once changed. He saw what he saw. Roger Patterson, who died in 1972, insisted until the end that the film was genuine. He passed a polygraph. Though skeptics rightly note a polygraph proves nothing on its own, neither man ever recanted. Neither ever admitted to a hoax, even when money was put on the table to do exactly that. The footprint casts still sit in research collections, still showing that impossible mid-foot flex. The film keeps getting scanned at higher and higher resolutions, run through every forensic technique that comes along, and every single time it gives the same answer. We still do not know. That is the truth the AI delivered. By all rights, 57 years in modern technology should have closed this case one way or the other. Instead, algorithms built to catch fakery and algorithms built to identify species found no match. The mystery did not just survive the most advanced tools we have ever built. It absorbed them. So, I want to leave the question with you because the AI cannot answer it. Is the Patterson-Gimlin film the most sophisticated hoax in history made with techniques we still cannot reproduce? Is it real footage of a creature that somehow slips past every other form of detection? Or is it something else entirely? Evidence of something we do not yet have the framework to understand? Tell me which one you land on in the comments, because I read them and the theories you come up with are often sharper than the experts. Roger Patterson pointed his camera at something walking through Bluff Creek, and more than half a century later, we are still asking the same questions he was. The answers are still just out of reach. If unsolved cases like this one pull at you, the next video on screen digs into another piece of evidence that science was supposed to explain and never could. Go watch that one now and subscribe so you are here when the next mystery refuses to die.